Hello, and welcome to the prototype webinar for the 2022 Jacobs Teen Innovation Challenge. Appreciate those of you who were able to join us live tonight. We'll probably have a small group, so feel free to jump in with questions in the chat or via the video. Either way, we're here to help and support you. We've got some slides and some information to share, but also this is an opportunity to have you share with each other and ask questions. And kind of see how things are going and see what we can do to help support you through the challenge. So with that, let me start some poll stuff and see how it goes. You should be seeing a poll on your screen asking a few questions. If you could just complete that when you get a second, that would be great. Just kind of a touch point to kind of figure out where people are, how things are going.
Can I ask a question before we get started?
Please.
So I've really been having my students use all the materials in Impactful, but until late last week, I had them submitting their actual documents to me in Google Classroom, just because it's easier for me to manage as their teacher. Is there any reason for me to have them submit the actual interim documents in Impactful? Like, that's not going to have anything to do with the end competition, will it?
Actually, it does. We are looking for them to submit the documents and complete the feedback loops in Impactful. Otherwise, the project won't look completed in there. So that is actually the overall loop that we're looking for in order to see the final work and to be able to see the progress as they go through. So if you do the work outside of Impactful, then we don't have visibility into that. And that was, and we do have people who have used Impactful outside of this challenge, but that was one of the requirements for this challenge, so that when we go into Impactful, we can ultimately see the progress that students have made and like how long they spent and kind of what their loops looked like. Does that make sense? Was that Abby who was asking that?
Yeah, yes, it is me. Sorry, I can turn my video on.
No, it's okay. I was just trying to.
Yeah, it is me. My challenge is that I need to track their grades and everything in Google Classroom. And if their documents are submitted, right, if their Google Docs are submitted in Google Classroom, then they can't also submit them in Impactful. So
I would think that if they submit,
well, I would have to return them back to them immediately so they can put them in Impactful, and then I'd have to comment on them there also. It's definitely duplicitous for me, right?
Yeah, I would think. I've not heard that from other folks. I think what they have students do is submitting things in Impactful, and then they're managing the grading element, because we intentionally don't do anything with grades. I know that many educators have to do that, so I understand that piece, but we intentionally don't do anything with grades. But I know people have done that, and I think the strategy has been have them do their work, their initial like ongoing feedback loops and work in Impactful, and then the grading elements happen outside of that piece. So that would be my thought. So
all right.
Thank you for that. I'm just looking at some of the poll results. So I've got some people doing great. Some are okay, some are not sure. It looks like almost half are still working on the understand phase, which is not unexpected. But a good number of 30% or so are already into the Ideate phase, which is fantastic. And then I know that there are still, a couple folks who have not yet started with getting students into Impactful because of schedules and other things. And so hopefully you still have an opportunity to do that, but we're going to talk about the timeline here in just a minute, which may help a little bit as well. So speaking of the timeline, this is just kind of a review of where we are. And for those of you who've joined late, today we're obviously at the February 22nd date. We'll continue to put these follow-up webinars over time. We intentionally scheduled these to be a little in advance, if you will, of when you would be working with students. So you'd have an opportunity to kind of hear from us and kind of chat with each other and get prepared So this doesn't have to be your timeline exactly. We know how that works. The really important piece here is that we're just leading up to the April 30th submission deadline. And that's the time when by April 30th, we will need you to have selected your in-class winners. Every educator who's participating in the challenge has an opportunity to submit one student team for every 6 student teams you have participating. So the theory, I mean, some of you may only have one, so I get that, but some of you have lots. And so the plan there is really that you could have an in-class pitch competition leading up to the April 30th, use the pitch rubric, and we won't talk about that today, but we will get into the pitch stuff in the next webinar. I'm going to kind of prepare you for that. And then get the recorded video pitches submitted to us. We will be looking for recorded video pitches and the slide decks to be submitted to us by April 30th. So that's the timeline, timeframe, just as a recap and reminder. And lastly, we also have we've talked about this before, we also have the sponsored award this year. So I guess my question is, are any of you, I know you're maybe just getting to this place now because you're kind of moving into the ideation. Students may not have actually gotten to the point where they've chosen exactly what they're going to do yet, but you might be getting there soon. So my question is, does anybody have any students who are kind of looking at projects in the field of photonics? And that can be solar, lasers, light, fiber optics, anything sort of in that vein, just kind of questioning. Not sure yet. Got a few of the not sures. I know that we had at least, go ahead.
Sorry. So my students they haven't started yet, as I told you.
Sure.
We have so many projects and I just didn't have time to start this one. And I'm so sorry because I know I registered because it sounds like something we would do. But my students are just starting to learn about photocell sensors. And so maybe it's something that they could use in this kind of project.
Absolutely. So this is a completely optional add-on this year. We had a local sponsor who works in the field of photonics, and they're sponsoring a separate award, an additional $1,000 award for if a student team project is in this area or in this field. And that's just because they're trying to incubate this kind of field and help the students, today's students, learn about this and potentially move in that direction over time. So we're kind of sharing that. So if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. So, but there is a possibility that if a student team were to win our challenge, for example, or one of our awards, if they were also working in the field of photonics, they could win a second award at the same time. Thank you for that. I appreciate those of you who responded. I know that it's a new thing that we're trying as well. So appreciate that. So today I want to take a moment to recap our last discussed phase, which was the Ideate phase. In that stage, we expected students to sort of state the problem, brainstorm, different ideas, and ultimately narrow down and select one. I know most of you are just either kind of wrapping that up and getting that point. So the idea is they finally get through the Ideate phase, and then they have one solution that they've got in their heads that they want to take to the prototype phase, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I'd love to get an idea of how the activities worked for you. How are your student teams progressing through the Ideate phase? How's it working? Do any of your students have a favorite Ideate activity? How might we brain dump? Worst possible idea? Just any feedback or thoughts on the experience and the activities that you're working on.
We've had some really great success with general brainstorming, and I actually opened it up to the whole class. So I had them go through one team at a time, and I posted their sort of defined problem question on the top of a whiteboard. And then I made and they explained their problem question. And then I had every kid in the class post it an idea for them even for the teams that they weren't on, to start off really, really broad. And that worked really, really beautifully. Many of my groups are struggling to come from that into an actual product or service that they would create. They're sort of like, oh, well, the government should do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, that's not a product or service. They want to create a new country or something.
Right.
So we're struggling a little with that.
Do you think that, Abby, do you think they're going to get there? I mean, I'm just kind of curious, obviously that's the hope here, but.
I think some of them are doing a really good job. Some of them have ideas that maybe aren't, in my mind, really the greatest, but they've come to sort of an actual product or service. And some of them, I really don't know. I mean, I have 2 or 3 groups right now that, I mean, I could lead them a little bit more directly, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And I've actually seen, in a couple of cases, I've seen some final projects in the past couple of years that also sometimes suffered from a little bit of that. But frankly, the experience itself is where, a lot of the value is. And so, and they may, as you're guiding them, and today's conversation may help a little, as you're guiding them through the final ideation phase, they should be thinking about the thing that they can take to the next level and bring to life in some way with the prototype. So maybe that helps them kind of, we see all this work is really nonlinear, and in the real world, we know that's true. So we've taken this approach with the challenge event that we, go through these in a linear fashion, but we know that's not always the case. So in some cases, you might have students who actually start prototyping and then they really sort of figure out what they were thinking or trying to do. But that's helpful. Does anyone else have anything to share in the chat or on mic, just kind of how it's going? Any, thoughts or comments about the ideation phase itself?
I think
Please.
Selena has her hand up.
Go ahead, Selena.
My students, well, one of them is really ahead and she is beginning with the prototype phase. I just downloaded some of the activities from Packpool. They haven't been in the platform. I just downloaded the activities and gave it to them. I printed them out and they were working on the one that they felt was better for their project. So one of them is almost ready to do the pitch, and the other one is still in the ideate phase, but he's also working on the competitor matrix.
Okay.
That activity, he's doing that one. So I think that what you said, that some of them start from the prototype phase and they go back.
Yep.
Oh, they work backwards. That's what one of my students is doing. And we were worried that maybe we had to go like through the steps in order. But now that I've heard that, I'm
no,
worried.
No, don't worry about that. We approach our content in that order just to kind of, if it's your first time in design thinking and this work, then sometimes that's helpful. But yeah, you can go in any order. And frankly, there's an advantage sometimes to doing that when you have students who jump ahead, because sometimes that's your opportunity to intervene when you see what they're doing and say, hey, this is really great, but you might want to revisit the understand phase and figure out how it impacts people. And so sometimes there's an opportunity to make a segue back to kind of tie it back into how it impacts people, or maybe even back to ideation where there needs to be, maybe you should do a little more brainstorming and kind of figure out. So there's, hopefully that'll be, I can't wait to hear how that goes in the end. So. All right, I'm going to jump ahead. So today you're looking at the visual of the design thinking phases with Impactful. Tonight we're going to talk through the activities within the prototype phase. So prototyping, means to design, which includes drafting or planning for service-oriented solutions, or in building and testing if it's a product. And so in this phase, we're going to, students will plan to get feedback from others, and then, depending on timeframes and stuff, like continually work, rework and improve their solutions until, kind of meets the needs of everyone. I love the prototyping phase. This is actually my favorite. If I had to pick one, but it's only because this is the time when they really get to roll up their sleeves and kind of like make something and build it and kind of make it come to life. And I think that's always an exciting time. So I'm going to play.
You have an idea. Now, bring it to life with prototyping. The prototype phase is all about designing and building your solution, then testing it with others to see how it works. Your team will start by designing a 2D or 3D model to go from an idea in your head to something visible. Models will help you visualize what your solution will look like and how it'll work. They can be made with physical materials like recycled plastic and paper, or they can be made digitally with graphic design apps. Then you'll use your model as a guide to build your prototype. A prototype is a simple and inexpensive version of your solution that works. It doesn't have to work fully or perfectly, but it should be able to be used by other people so they can test it and provide feedback. Once your prototype is ready, take it to the people who need it and ask them to try it out and tell you what they think. Based on their feedback, you may enter a cycle of redesigning, building, and retesting until your solution evolves into something impactful that meets people's needs. Building a better world happens by continually improving your solution over and over again. You have an idea. Now,
Nope.
bring it to life with
Hold on. We already did that. Okay.
So now I'm gonna talk to you about the different activities that you can go over and complete as part of as a prototype. I know Selena mentioned some of those that she has already started with. So here students will be designing and building their solution and testing it with other people to get feedback. And that's the most important part of the prototyping phase, getting feedback. The prototyping phase activities are divided into 3 categories as you see in the screen. Design it, build it, and test it. We're gonna take a closer look at each category. Please remember that we encourage all teams to do an activity from each category, but of course it's up to you to decide which activities to do. So in the first category, we have 2 activities under design it. These are gonna help students build 2D models. Students have the option to use pen and paper or a digital software to design their prototype. Some students will create a prototype, which can be graph or sketch. And as we have heard so far, other students might be creating a service, such as creating a campaign, fundraiser, petition, or website. And they can use, you can draft an outline, a flow chart, or a concept map. So it depends on whether students are using designing a product or service, but of course all the activities have different forms of completing those activities depending on what they're creating. In activity 2, the 3D model, students have the option to craft materials or use 3D design programs such as Tinkercad to prototype their solution. So this is bringing it a little bit to life and testing it out with real people. So the 3D model option is like now like a physical option or a digital asset that you can use to test with people. Next, we have the build it category. Well, you'll find activities that guide students through building a working model of their prototype. So this is the one they get to test with people. And last but not least, we have the tested category. These are activities that help students test their prototype with other people. Using these resources and activities, we want to advance students toward prototyping and testing their ideas for the final pitch event. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat about the different activities. Any questions, or feel free to unmute yourself if you have any.
I'll just chime in. Bianca hit it, she covered this real well, but it is worth like noting, we've seen prototypes in the past, and I think that the big key is we broke up the activities into these multi-steps because there is that design it piece, which can be lower, fidelity, maybe a sketching or, whiteboarding or whatever. And then the building it piece is and kind of bring that to life in some way. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, as she said, it can be just part of it. And even if you had to skimp on prototyping, I would say I would focus on the building. You probably have to do a little modeling first. But with that key piece, which is probably the important part to really talk to students about, is what is their plan for testing it with users? Even if they don't get a chance to do so, or if they don't have a formal testing approach, at least if they have the mindset of how it would be tested and like what types of feedback they might be looking for, it can help frame their thinking in the way they're building stuff. So that would be my suggestion, is have them think about how it's going to be tested with the affected users.
Yeah, thank you, Moni. And I think something also that you mentioned earlier to me was that there can be like multiple designs and iterations of the prototype. So don't worry, like I think that was mentioned during one of the earlier comments too. If you're not sure about what is it gonna be, if they just have it first with pencil and paper, that's fine. Get it out, test it out with people. As right now, it's a little bit still maybe some of we're still going through some COVID challenges, but try testing it with people, family members, classmates. And just know that it might take a few phases or tries before designing a final prototype. No, there's never always a final
No.
a final version, because I think that's something that we see, no, Moni, that we're never happy and we always want to keep refining.
We're always constantly iterating, even no matter what. In software development, we kind of talk about it as if it were a lawn. In the US, people have a fascination with mowing their lawns. And if you do that, that's great, but it's only done for a while. So that's okay. That's kind of the same philosophy.
So if we don't have any questions, feel free to add them as we are going through the slides, or add them in the chat. Remember, you can post your questions in the chat, but we wanted to show you an example about how a prototype can go maybe not the best way. So play pumps was an idea to use children's play to power water pumps in South Africa. So as you're gonna see it, we're gonna play a little bit of the video. It looked and like a great idea for kids to be able to help the community get clean drinking water, but let's take a look and see what happens.
All right, so Troubled Water takes a look at a kind of development tool or technology that was supposed to help the problems that people had with hand pumps in small villages and developing nations. Basically kind of a merry-go-round, if you will, that kids would play on and that would pump water, right? You found this story, or you did this story several years ago.
That's correct. Yes, I did.
And so why go back and revisit it?
Well, about a year ago, I found out after I'd reported on this technology a couple of times for Frontline World, I found out that there were some problems in the field with the technology. About a year after my story had been broadcast, about an announcement from Washington came that they were going to donate about $16 million between the US government and the CASE Foundation to expand this technology across several African nations. And after that announcement in 2006, I assumed that the technology was rolling out well and that lots of people across Africa were getting fresh, clean drinking water due to this technology called the play pump. But I found out about a year ago that things were not going well. So I went with a camera and went back to Africa to find out for myself on the ground what was going on.
So what are some of the kind of systemic challenges? Is it an organizational problem? Is it a rollout problem? Is it a problem with the actual tool itself?
I think part of it was this push to get many play pumps into the ground on a fairly quick timeline. And I think that proved to be challenging from a maintenance point of view, that pumps would break down and they were not able to be fixed. And that had significant repercussions because, you know, as I say, we're not talking about television sets that are breaking down. We're talking about people's access to clean drinking water. So when a pump breaks down, that's really critical and can be detrimental to a community. And I think there were also kind of cultural issues that arose. I think that not every community where a play pump was installed necessarily in the end wanted this technology. So there was some pushback from the users themselves. And I think finally the main thing is that this is supposed to be a toy that children play on. And as they pump and spin around and round on the play pump, fresh water is pumped at the same time. And I think they found that children, like everywhere in the world, sometimes get tired of playing on one toy all the time. But if they were relying on the energy of children, they really needed them to be spinning and spinning literally for hours a day to provide adequate water. And of course they weren't. And that's another thing that I found.
Thank you, Moni. So as you see, once the play pump was installed, like different issues started to evolve around the community, around the users, different sorts of even cultural issues too, right? So just to remind us that once we start designing working through the different phrases, we shouldn't be rushing through each of the phases and really, as mentioned earlier, going back and forth between the different phases that you need, right? So even if you start designing a phase and you see the students are really struggling with understanding the users, going back to that first phase of helping students understand the problem or the root causes that is causing the problem, it's really part of the design thinking phase. So we just wanted to mention that the importance of gathering feedback from real users, by interviews, using any resources that are available in the PACFL curriculum or any others that you can think about. Yes, so please, any questions related to this example? I think we chose this example because it shows like in a large scale what can be some of the negative sides of this.
Well, it also shows the opportunity, what happened when they didn't test it at scale. So it's an opportunity to kind of share with, you have a great idea. Sometimes you really need to test it with impacted people. That one's a little bit much of a bigger scale and a bigger impact, because the testing obviously means that the lack of testing and the impact means that people don't have clean drinking water, which is, as she said, it's horrible. It's not the same thing as they can't watch TV. So
yeah. Okay. So we'll now move to some announcements of the Virtual Exchange pilot. Thank you so much for those who are engaging deeply with the experience. I did send, well, let me go through the different bullet points so I can cover each one. So I've been contacting some of you through email, and some of you might need to find alternative ways to do that first meeting with your partner educator, and that's fine, right? So we strongly suggest meeting for the first time virtually live, but of course we understand that challenges arise, time arises, challenges with schedules, all sorts of things, right? So we want to encourage using asynchronous activities to connect with your partner. So one resource that I've been suggesting through email to some of you is the use of Flipgrid. And some of you have used that platform before, where you can upload videos and share an account between users. So I would suggest using that platform if you need to connect asynchronous with your partner teacher. So the next one, most upcoming activities can be done asynchronously, where some of those activities include, as you have seen, postcards or making jam boards. So feel free to modify those activities as you see the need. And new activities are going to be posted this week. I know some of you are ahead and ready for the next one, and some of you might be on the still first step of trying to connect and reach out to your asynchronous partner. And I want to really kind of land the idea that it's really nice to connect with someone from a different country or even a different city. So even if your students are able to create like a digital postcard and say hi to the other partner teacher and say what SDG goal you're working on, that's already building like a connection. So I would strongly suggest working on those asynchronous activities. If you haven't been able to virtually connect live, now use those other activities and use the ones that are more useful for you. If there's one that you're like, this wouldn't be useful, feel free to skip that activity. And of course, we always encourage you to share your experience in the PACFL community. So that link has been emailed to you. And take a moment, please, to reply to the email that I sent you an email for individual check-in. That helps us a lot because we can see what's going on behind the scenes. What are some of the challenges that you're having? Even if you're having a good experience, that's helpful too, to see what we should keep for next year. So please take a moment and reply to that email with any information or comments that you have. And I can take any questions here if there's anything related to anything that I have said about the virtual experience or.
We'll give people time at the end too, in case they want to stick around. We only have a couple more slides left. So I want to remind folks, it's been in my emails, it's been on the screen. Throughout the competition, we are encouraging you to share, you and or your students, if they're comfortable, to share their progress on social media. So there was a clarifying question. I think there was some confusion about whether that needed to wait until the end of the challenge. And no, these are extra awards that we make available to people throughout the process, just so that you and we and the students have a chance to get glimpses into the work and the progress that's being made across, those who are working on the challenge. So share on social media with JTIC 22. And with that, I'm going to show you a moment to take a spotlight on some of the teachers who've been posting on social media. And we just love seeing these, we love seeing these pictures and these moments of the work that's happening. So we just thank you for those of you who are able to do that. And for those of you who are looking for inspiration or something to share with your students or see the other work, you can also just go on social media and look at JTIC 22. I think the bulk of what I'm seeing is in Twitter and Instagram. So, but we're open to you sharing it anywhere. You can also share, or they could share in the Packful community if they don't feel like they want to use an actual social media platform. But thank you to Stephanie and Justin and folks who have been sharing. We really appreciate that. It's always great to see. And that officially wraps up our official presentation and chat. But we are here to answer any questions or get any feedback or see how we can help you and see, I know some of you, like I said, you're just thinking about getting started. I don't know if this inspired you to continue leading up to April 30th. There's still time. Just so you know, we are getting ready to take this entire, basically a challenge experience, and we're boxing it up, not really, into a camp experience on site that we're going to do with some students over spring break. So we really believe and know that this work can be done in a shortened time period if that's all you have access to. It's all about time boxing and just getting something done and then having a final pitch submission at the end. So hopefully that inspires you a little bit. We love seeing the work that comes out of these things, and really the most important piece are those students who have an opportunity to do this and then start thinking differently about what they can do in the world. That's why we're here. That's what invigorates us and excites us about this work, is when they get the chance to think of themselves as somebody who can build and create something and do that work. That's the moment. All right, I'm going to officially end the recording.